Welcome to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast with your host, wealth coach Wade Reed.
Hey, what's up, Money Masters? It's Wade Reed here for another episode of the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. And I have another special guest with me today who's going to talk to you guys about money mindset. Trey, hello.
Hey, Wade. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, man. I'm so glad to reconnect with you. It's been most of a year since we've talked. How have you been?
It has. That's been the longest hiatus with us for a decade. I mean,
probably.
I was thinking about that when you gave me a call, and I thought, man, when did we first connect? Had to have been almost 15 years ago.
I've got the exact date. You want to know what it was?
I want to know what it is.
It was August 2017.
17. Okay, so it feels longer. I don't know if that's
good or bad. I think it's good because
it's definitely good. It's definitely good.
We were almost like blood brothers from the beginning, where we just resonated with each other. We totally appreciated each other's deeper philosophical mindsets, and I think that's probably why it feels like longer.
Absolutely. We had some phenomenal conversations over that time period. Still do, but at that,
Still do.
I learned a whole lot from our interactions, and for that, I know we've talked about this before that. I very much thank you, but it's a good reminder that you want to surround yourself with people that you can learn from and help build you as a person and help grow.
Yeah, totally agree with that, man. Who is it? Jim Rohn and maybe others who have made famous the phrase that you become like the top 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So be careful who you choose to spend time with, right?
You bet. Great advice.
Yeah. So listeners, my friends, money masters, Trey has been a client. He started as a client in 2017. Even though very successful in his life and his business, still wanted some support. So hired me for coaching. And we looked at all things personal finance. We looked at the business cash flows, looked at personal cash flows, debt, investment strategy, protection strategy, and figured out where some deficiencies were. Tax strategy, I think, was a big deal as well. But Trey, tell us a little bit about your business background, like what you grew up doing and how you became who you are today in business.
So my dad was a dentist. My mom was a dental hygienist, and I followed suit and went right into dentistry. And funny enough, you learn how much you didn't actually know about it as you go through that process. But I became a dentist. I graduated in 2008. That is where my training and background is. I went in with my dad, and I was very fortunate to have a mentor I could trust right out of the gate. So that was very valuable to me. And I knew that's what I needed to look for. I'm someone that seeks out coaching in every aspect of my life. So that was a really fortunate place for me to come from and be born into. But I bought his practice from him in 2011 and just started growing, and opened my second one in 2014, early 2014. Bought another one in 2016, and then was off to the races. And at this point, I no longer practice dentistry. I run the company, I train, I manage. We have bought at this point or started 12 practices. I've sold one, and we are looking at the horizon of where to go next. So I've transitioned from dentist over to, I guess you would call it CEO, but my background is still in the medical aspect of it. And because of that, I have a very unique view on how I run the company and what I do. But it's been a lot of fun. I've had a great time doing it. I've put together a great team. I have a lot of great people around me, and we have a lot of fun together.
Oh, that's so cool. I don't hear that from everyone who's in business and who are running businesses, that they're having fun. So like, we're in the topic of money mindset today. Tell us about the role of having a proactive, positive, abundant, growth-oriented mindset versus the scarcity or poverty mindset that a lot of people fall into, or victim mindset that people fall into.
So I am, and some of this I will preface this with, much of my mindset, I had something with being able to follow into a family practice. I was very fortunate to have, I was born into a very abundance mindset. I have found a lot of pieces of, within that abundance mindset where I hold on to this scarcity piece, and you find it throughout that you have to go work to overcome or switch over into that abundance thinking. But it's been an interesting journey because I'm very aware, and I reflect very much on my progress and how I do. So it's been fun going through the process, evaluating how I came to be where I am. But some of my, I would say a lot, not some, I would say all of my success comes from that abundant mindset in terms of I look, and I'm in medical field. So my success, the more successful I am, the more people get help. And that's become a big driver for me in the sense that I believe in what we do, and I believe we do a great job. So I want to do more of it. And because of that, I want to, you want to push that forward into more people. You want to treat more people. So abundance has been something that I constantly think that is a way to provide value, my services that I offer, and that value exchange should be pushed. I love the aspect of, I know we talk money specifically and wealth strategy, but when you talk about just economics and the exchange of value and how currency has come about and whatnot, but you start to realize how fascinating that is, providing and creating value in the world.
Yeah.
That's been a big driver for me. I've really enjoyed it. I mean, the abundance thought process has been a key driver for it. I would not nearly be able to do what I do to this level if I didn't believe in that thinking, that process.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we need to define what abundance looks like compared to scarcity and victimhood. I mean, it might sound obvious because you've been in it all your life, and I've had a more or less abundant mindset a lot of my life as well, but I want to just clarify. So a lot of people view the world as either or transaction. Somebody wins, somebody loses. There's a finite grouping of resources that are out there. And if I win, you lose, and vice versa. In business in particular, that seems to show up a lot, right? If I'm successful down the road as a dentist, and I'm sorry, I cut you off for a sec. Let me share my thought and then we'll get yours. So if the dentist down the street is successful, then he's taking my patients away. I can't be successful. That's like the scarcity victim mindset, right? Have you seen others of your peers in the industry behave that way?
Very much so. So I think that mindset, which is the zero sum mindset, there's a finite amount of pie. My win has to equate to yours or someone else's loss, and on a very individual basis to go to the patient. My win of a patient is your loss of a patient. Think of the same thing if my success in a practice is someone else's loss in a practice, and it can expand to whatever level you want to take it. So I think, and what I was alluding to earlier with the aspect of value exchange and value creation is exactly that. Of I don't believe in the zero sum game. You create value and create more. You create a bigger pie. That's the thought process of abundance in my mind. When I define that, when we start talking about zero sum game versus value creation.
Yeah. So create a bigger pie. I think there's people listening who might not really appreciate what that means. Do you have any examples of how you've seen that play out?
Sure. So a good example, let's go to employment. As you create and grow and think bigger, a single small practice becomes a larger practice, and let's say you have 5 people on your team, 5 jobs. It's not like you hire one other person to 6 and someone else loses somebody. Create a bigger practice. Now you can hire more jobs. You've created that. There's value creation. There's more employment. There's another job created from essentially nothing. But then it gets larger, multiple practices, multiple jobs. Think of someone that starts a medical practice or a dental practice from scratch. Anything starting from nothing, all of that didn't exist before, now it exists. So it's not taking from someone else. It's creating from ground up.
That's really interesting perspective on the dental industry specifically and I guess just in general, if you have an idea and you can solve a problem, and perhaps it's a similar problem to someone else, but you can solve it in a more efficient way or a better way, in a way that people appreciate, then they're going to come to you and you're going to be able to serve them in the way that they want to be served. Their problem wants to be solved. I think of it in terms of like land. We live in the United States of America. There's literally a finite amount of land. And you look at a city, and a city has a certain type of model. Like back in the day, it was farmland, and farmland was hundreds of acres. And then when we stopped farming as much and started to build cities, the cities only had a limited amount of space. But then what did we do when the amount of space and the number of people coming to the cities was more than the available space? We got creative and we started to build vertically, didn't we? We figured out how to deepen the value proposition. And I think that's a lot about what you're saying, isn't it? Instead of a single family residence on a bunch of acres, now we have multifamily on that same acreage. Maybe we have really dense populations in vertical high rises like New York City and other large cities. That's the type of thinking we want you guys to be in, is how do we take the same amount of resource and make more out of it? And that requires a little creativity. That often requires mentorship to help seed ideas and talk through things. Have you seen that too? Like the mentors you've had in your life have helped you see the perspective of a greater outcome than you could see yourself?
Very much so. Very much so. And there's tremendous value in that when you look, you don't know your blind spots. And when you look at from that standpoint, everything that has made me to this point creates both the positive and the negative. It creates the blind spots as well. I have my own bias because of the experiences that I've had throughout my life up to this point. You have different blind spots that has created your bias, both positive and negative up to this point. Your lens is different than mine. Your paradigm is different than mine. So when I pair up with you as a mentor, you can then basically you tell me what you're looking through, that paradigm that I'm not seeing, and it uncovers blind spots that are incredibly helpful to then look at and realize, hey, we can do this, or hey, you're thinking like this. Let's look at different way. So value is huge in that respect. Mentorship, that is.
Yeah, no doubt. As you're speaking those words, a book comes to mind called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And I found a little quote in here I want to share with you guys, exactly related to this. It says, "Circumstance does not make the man. It reveals him to himself." That's that blind spot stuff you're talking about. The circumstances of our lives are a function of the choices that we've made. And sometimes we're blind to the fact that we are the ones who are the reason for our circumstances. It says, "No such conditions can exist as descending into vice and its attending sufferings apart from," this is interesting words, "vicious inclinations, or ascending into virtue and its pure happiness without the continued cultivation of virtuous aspirations." That's the abundance thinking. Virtuous aspiration. "A man, therefore, as the Lord and master of thought, is the maker of himself, the shaper and author of environment. Even at birth, the soul comes to its own, and through every step of its earthly pilgrimage, it attracts those combinations of conditions which reveal itself, which are the reflections of its own purity and impurity, its strengths and weaknesses. Men do not attract that which they want. They attract that which they are." Now that's our deep thinking, right? We're back into it from 2017 to today. This is what we go. This is what we do. This is our MO. So how do we not attract what we want, but what we are? What do you hear in that?
So, and I'm going to focus on that last little bit, but abundance thinking will create more abundance thinking. So that which you are will create, or you are attracted to more of what you are. As you become in that thought process becomes more prevalent in your mindset, you will drive towards that in your actions, which will then create that emotion and that belief system that creates more of the actions in that direction. It's the success begets a success thought process. So hold your mirror up to yourself and realize that whatever you're driving towards is going to be that. I mean, and it's present in what you mentioned earlier, in the 5 people around you. You want to know what you're like, look at your 5 closest friends, because you're mirroring, you're chasing what you are. So I think that's very powerful in the result or in the thought process of how important it is to be abundant in your thinking.
Right.
It spirals the other way too.
In what way? What have you seen in the opposite spiral?
What we talk about is, we're talking about abundance, and obviously we're pushing towards that abundance. But think about when you hear the phrase mediocrity, in one area of your life, seeps into every area of your life. you can go in the other direction where that scarcity mindset leads to more scarcity thinking and more scarcity thinking. So it's important. What you believe is very important. How you view the world is very important because it's going to translate into how you navigate this world, choices and decisions you make in this world, which will then create more of whichever direction you're going.
Yeah. I've seen a diagram of what you're talking, and it looks a lot like a tornado, right? Wide at the top, narrow at the bottom. And that wider at the top, don't think of the destructive nature of the tornado, just the shape, like the conical shape of a tornado. And it is a spiraling thing. And tornadoes there are interesting analogies to this because things are constantly in motion in our lives. And sometimes it's chaotic and things aren't going as planned. Maybe the financial resources have come down. Maybe you've had a major health issue show up. Maybe a family member's passed on and you needed to help them financially. Maybe an accident took place. There's all kinds of things. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe your business is crumbling because of some outside circumstance. In fact, I was just with a guy who's a land developer last night, and he said that his first fortune, which he built from about 27 to 35, 40 years old, was depleted due to what he called a technicality. And he had a lot of land development in Houston, where you're at, Trey. And he said that a hurricane came through. And due to the nature of that hurricane, a lot of his land was there. And even though he had insurance, it was just a myriad of things that for a period of time before the hurricane had occurred, that this was 2008 to 2009, by the way, when this thing was happening. So all of his revenues from outside business activities went away. He was in a space where a lot of healthcare practitioners, I guess, were paying him consulting fees and things to learn whatever he was teaching. I think it was all land development stuff. The coaching and mentoring that he was doing and everyone's payments, they were struggling in business due to the circumstances. And so there are certainly circumstances outside of our control that can impact us, that cause diminutions of financial resources, and thereby that affects our thinking. He got into a mode that he was like, oh, I can get through this. And then the hurricane, like he had the resource, he was going to make it. And then the technicality of the hurricane, one more thing out of his control. And it literally took him away because it took a year for the insurance company to even audit what had happened. There was so much devastation. And he had to surrender to it and recognize that there were things out of his control. But because he had a proactive, abundant mindset, he was like, I'm going to get through this. He lost his wife through that mess. He had some kids, and he's been rebuilding since then. So I'm meeting him now on the second wealth that he's built. And he's sharing these stories going, I got through that because of the mindset that I had of abundance. He could have totally shrunk and said, screw it, man. The tornado has hit. What's the term? Hypothetically, the tornado has hit. It's taken everything away. My life is worthless. I'm not worth it. And in the end, some people take their lives in circumstances like that. That's like the end result of the worst spiral down of scarcity, is when we actually take our lives, or we blame life so heavily we never get back to a productive life. We've seen that from time to time. I've had some clients that have come to me wanting to possibly work with me who just said, man, society's taking all my money away. And I'm like, no, society's not doing a thing to you. You are doing a thing to you. The way you believe about it. And he didn't want to hear it. And he walked away because he just didn't share the mindset. He didn't want to allow that he had control over his life. But guys, we have control over a lot of the circumstances, particularly how we think, and thereby the emotion that comes with that, and thereby the action that we take, and thereby the result that we get. So Trey, man, thanks for bringing that up. That's so powerful what you shared. I'm curious what other thoughts you have on.
So in response to that popped something into my mind that has been very prevalent in the conversations I've had with people in my business. Now, I actually, right before this, up until this podcast, I was having one exactly of this nature. Things happen. A tornado, for example. Things are out of your control. And, Houston, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, you have earthquakes, you have all these tsunamis, you have all these natural disasters throughout the world that you are not going to be able to actually affect whatsoever. But you certainly can be affected by them. The concept of your sphere of influence, and I know you're familiar with that concept, but for those of you that aren't, a sphere of influence, think of a circle and everything within that circle you have control over. And everything outside that circle, you don't have control over. An earthquake, a flood, a tornado, acts of God, so to speak, are outside of that circle. Things happen that are out of your control, and to some extent, you are a victim of those circumstances. But some things happen outside of that circle that you can then pick up and put right inside of that circle. And once it is inside that circle, you are able to address that issue. And from a business perspective, when you're coaching or leading people and you talk about mindset in that regard, the idea is, hey, make everything, and fault is a very negative word, so I don't mean to use this word, but it's the easiest for people to understand. Make everything your fault. Because if you make it your fault, you can now fix it. It's within your control. It's within your circle of influence. And now you have the ability to change it. And what people fight back on when this is a new concept, they come in and say, hey, everything was destroyed. A tornado came in. Flood happened. All my buildings were flooded, or my building was flooded. My practice is gone. Whatever the issue is. My home and insurance isn't coming in for a year to even, you're not even talking, you're last on the list, so it feels. Mm-hmm. Those things you can't control, but what you can control is your mindset. What's important and the most positive aspect of that sphere of influence is that mindset. And when you think of things through an abundant lens and you look at it as, you know what, I can recover. I can control how I believe and how I act and how I respond to this. Doesn't make it easy, but it is possible. And when you start believing that and you start pushing that, now you can overcome those things. And you can have, which I love the story that you just told, because although you have destruction and all this wake of a spiral of catastrophes happening after this, he's back on the second round. And that doesn't happen without that mindset of, hey, you know what? I can beat this. I can handle this. I can move through this. And how I view it is what's going to take me forward. So I love that. I mean, hearing that is a phenomenal example of what you do have control over. Yeah. There's plenty you don't, but you always have control over your mindset.
I absolutely agree with that. And I like the analogy of the circle. So in the world of personal finance that I live in and the coaching that I do with people, oftentimes those natural disasters you're talking about, we can move some things inside the circle. We can't affect the actual natural disaster, but we can have liquidity in our life. We can keep our cash in a position where if something goes awry, we can deal with making payments for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. We can have insurance products that help protect against that. And we only come out of pocket with a few thousand, and they come out of pocket with the hundreds of thousands to help recover some of those losses. We can have business entities in place that help protect against liability if we get sued. We can have estate planning in place that makes the transition at our deaths easier for our heirs, whether it's a spouse or children. We can put together financial strategies to minimize taking on consumer debt. We can manage our spending. There's so many things we actually do have control over that often are thought of as out of our control that help us build wealth. And there's a certain amount of confidence that happens when we do those things. And with the confidence, then we can think more creatively about problem solving. And as we think more about problem solving, whether we're employed by somebody or running a business, we can then create better solutions that create more value, which brings more money, which gives us more opportunity to be a steward over those dollars and apply them well in our lives, take care of our local families, take care of the community around us, and make sure that if we have gotten into old consumer debts, we have funds to pay them off. Like, life happens, but we have so many ways to get through that stuff. Oftentimes in my life, so wealth comes in 5 tracks, right? It's not just money, but physical, mental, spiritual, and social. And so my spiritual side gets me through a lot of things. The belief I have in a higher power, that I'm here for a reason, and that these circumstances, although not enjoyable, can still be for my good if I allow it to. If I think of how is this happening for me rather than to me, that subtle one-word shift, how is this happening for rather than to me, helps us see that in the light, I think, what you were saying earlier, it's all my fault. If it's all my fault, I have some control over it. If this is happening for my benefit, what lessons can I learn that can help me move forward and that allow me to be a better version of myself as I get past whatever the circumstance is?
I love that. Extrapolate that out to a larger picture, zoom out of exactly what you just said. And I know you and I have talked about this, and I think actually I've used this probably more so than any other piece of small piece of mindset to apply, and that is life. All of life happens for you, not to you. And it just takes everything and shifts that over as what can you find in this?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's the old cliche, it's silver linings. There's just,
right.
The silver linings. There's always something. So, but I love that. It's a beautiful way to look at life in general.
Yeah.
Same
it takes
thing.
practice though, right? It's not easy. It gets
does.
easier, but I don't think any of us in our circumstance that's difficult automatically says, oh, I'm so glad this is happening for me. We all go into victim mode, at least temporarily. My gosh, I can't believe this is happening right now. This sucks. This is the worst. I hate this. And then because we have experience in the past that said, oh, I've had tough things happen, I've gotten through it, our mindset can start to shift into that more abundant thinking of, well, what if I think about how this is happening for me? And it gives us just a little bit more hope. And that hope leads to positive action. And it builds and builds and builds. And of course, if we have a good sphere or circle of people, spouse, children, parents, grandparents, siblings, maybe you live alone. Like I have a neighbor whose son lives in New York City in a 300 square foot apartment, basically by himself. If something happens to him, who does he turn to? Well, he's got a church community that he spends time with on Sunday. So he's got some people. He's got his work group that he's developing some friendships. So even though he is alone, his family's all here in Utah. He has people he can turn to for support. So I have one more thought. Maybe we'll wrap. And if you have any more thoughts on that, I'll let you open up. But I have one more thought that I think will let us dialogue for just another minute here. There's this idea that I want to have something. So I better do the activities that I need to do to have that. Or I want to be like the millionaires. So I better do the behaviors that they do so that I can have what they have. People who are listening to this to accelerate wealth, they're often thinking about the financial means of their life. So they look to people like you, even 12 practices. There's a lot of dentists out there who just have one, who maybe have ambition to do that, but don't know how. And so they're thinking, man, Trey's got the holy grail. He's got the life I want to live. So they try to do the things you do to have the things you have, but they aren't necessarily the person they need to be yet. And so there's this flipping of this. We have to be the person that we need to be, or learn what the characteristics are of the person that we want to be like, which then causes the behavior, the doing activities, which then allows us to have. So it's really be, do, not do, have, not have, do, be. You don't become that person after you have it. You get it after you've become the person who's worthy of it, who's capable of managing it and receiving it. How have you seen that play out in your life?
That goes back to your 5 aspects of wealth. So when you talk about the 5 aspects of wealth and how you can build around you, not just the financial piece, you're creating who you are. You're creating you from the inside out. And then that shines through. So that thought process and that environment you have now created is now responsible for actions and decisions that you're making, and whether you know it or not, whether they be positive or negative. So you start to focus on who you are. You focus on building those aspects of building the 5 aspects of wealth that you mentioned in whatever is appropriate for you. And as you do that, the rest is going to fall in place from the standpoint of what you have is the last piece. And let's apply it specifically to finances. How you view money, how you view time, decisions you're going to make in just that. That's typically an inverse relationship, but how you're going to make decisions and have that balance, your relationships, how does that play in, and where does that skew the seesaw from one of those to the other? The spiritual aspects of how you view money and what to do with it, the value of money. Those things are all going to be an afterthought of what you have because of who you are. So do, very important and very powerful.
I think it's been one of the most powerful things I've ever come across over the past 15 years, is that just those 3 words: be, then do, then have. And some of the mentors I've had, both actual and virtual, have used the phrase, you need to act as if. Like we create a vision for what our future might be. We write it down, we speak it out loud, We start to create it through those words that we have first thought, which then become words, both spoken and written. As that happens, we can start to attract that to ourselves. We start to become the person worthy of those things. We start to do the behaviors that cause those actions to take place. People come into our lives that we may not have recognized as teachers and as mentors, again, paid or unpaid, but people that can support us in working through that vision. But the way it has to be written is in the present tense, as if it already exists. Speaking the words, I am wealthy versus I want to be wealthy. I am an abundant thinker. I am a value creator. I have a certain size house. I have a certain amount in the bank account. I am a business owner. I am a leader in my company. If we speak in the present tense, right in the present tense as if it already exists, then we go act as if it already occurs. There's a little bit of pretending that kind of exists in that, but it's training the mind to believe it. And here's some, I don't have the exact study on this, but I was informed over the last few years about the idea of muscle repetition. So somebody playing the piano, go practice a certain piece for an hour physically, actually typing it out on the keys to practice, versus somebody who sits at the piano, closes their eyes, and simply visualizes themselves practicing the piano. What they found was those who practiced in their minds had measurable progress, even though they didn't actually touch the keys. This, to me, illustrates the value of the mind. Our visualizing faculty in the mind starts to build actual outcomes by practicing what you say, by practicing who you are, visualizing what you want in your mind. You start to actually have it occur. And there's a guy named Joe Dispenza that I came across. He's been doing a ton of training on this topic. And what he says is your personal reality, that's the definition of personality. Your personality is your personal reality. And if you want your personal reality to be different, you wake up in the morning, you grab your phone, you go to the bathroom, you have your coffee, your water, you have your certain routine. Everything we do throughout the day, if we did the exact same thing in the morning as we did yesterday, we're likely to get the exact same result today as we did yesterday. So if you want something different, you have to act as if. You get up and you don't do the same exact routine, because that causes the same exact neural pathways in the mind to start triggering the same exact feelings, which then cause the same exact actions, which then you get the same results. So maybe you need to wake up and read a book. Maybe you need to wake up and do an affirmation. Maybe you need to wake up and read your vision statement to yourself, and then feel what it feels like to be in that space, and then start your day off in a more productive way than what you're used to. The only way things change is if our thinking changes. That's what I'm learning. And again, curious if you have kind of parting thoughts on that as we wrap up.
Well, your beliefs lead to your actions. So act as if is a phenomenal way to say that or paint that picture. And you mentioned a word or a version of a word many times in what you just said. It's vision. And your vision needs to be very vivid. It needs to be very well defined, and it should be. And I believe there's a lot of ways to do this. I do agree with you in the sense that you need to be very specific in your vision, and it needs to be in the present tense because of everything you just said. Because you're already there. Act as if. And it's a roadmap, and the vision is where you're headed. You have a destination. Act like you're already there, and you're going to get there faster.
Cool. Thanks so much for being with me, Trey. I have loved having you as guest. I'm sure we'll do this again if you're willing. You willing?
Absolutely. I'm willing.
Guys,
I'm willing.
I wish we had a live audience, because I would ask them, guys, was this fun having Trey on? Like, give a fist pump to yourself if you did. Make a comment on the YouTube page here. Let me know in the, do a review of the podcast if you're liking this stuff. I just love you guys. I love the listeners here. I love that you're here, because if you're listening to this, you're already kind of in the process, if not really deep into the process of personal development, becoming a better version of you, which means you are likely attracting more opportunities to create wealth. And I hope what we've been talking about today on money mindset is going to be helpful for you. You got to be who you need to be, so then you can do the activities that need to be done, so then you can get the results that you're looking for. So guys, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wealth Acceleration Podcast. We hope the insights from today's episode help you streamline your finances and grow your wealth stress-free. For show notes from today's episode and more tips on creating a comprehensive wealth-building plan, visit moneymasterycoaching.com. Remember, financial freedom is attainable. Until next time, keep accelerating towards your goals. See you on the next episode.